In a dramatic and highly confidential maneuver, China's top leadership has launched a sweeping internal campaign to combat what it sees as a historic challenge to its global aspirations, President Donald Trump's renewed tariff offensive. A top-secret document, recently leaked from Zhongnanhai, the central headquarters of the Chinese Communist Party, reveals an extraordinary nationwide directive issued in April 2025. According to the document, all levels of China's civilian and military leadership, from provincial governors to district officers and army division commanders, were summoned into tightly controlled, soundproofed rooms. Access was so restricted that not a single device, note, or record was allowed to leave. What they were ordered to read was a classified resolution from the Politburo that not only outlines Beijing's detailed response to Trump's aggressive economic tactics but also sketches a grander blueprint, a high-stakes, long-term plan to reclaim China's global leadership in the face of mounting international resistance. At the heart of this top-level directive is a coordinated political and economic counteroffensive that Beijing frames as a once-in-a-century transformation. The document warns that the current crisis could redefine global power structures, and outlines China's intention to lead that transformation rather than be shaped by it. Three key nations, Vietnam, India, and the United States, feature prominently in what officials describe as a rapidly evolving geopolitical chessboard. Central to the strategy is the revitalization of China's International United Front work, a long-standing tool of political influence designed to build coalitions abroad. The leaked resolution calls for a new two-pronged approach, a collaboration between the United Front Work Department and the Ministry of Health, aimed at projecting both political unity and humanitarian leadership. The directive outlines three main pillars of China's international engagement going forward: leverage global discontent, exploit the widespread international backlash against Trump's protectionist policies, which have alienated many of the United States' traditional allies, forge a new economic alliance, actively court economically advanced nations, such as Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, while deepening ties with regional neighbors, to construct a powerful global bloc that can challenge Washington's dominance, defend the multilateral trade order, reaffirm commitment to the rules-based global trade system, with the World Trade Organization as its centerpiece. In an attempt to isolate the U.S. and portray China as the true steward of globalization, the resolution goes further, laying out a contingency plan should Trump escalate the tariff war to its extremes. In such a case, China aims to mobilize this international coalition, pull strategically positioned nations like India and Vietnam away from American influence, and capitalize on what Beijing perceives as Washington's growing isolationism. The ultimate goal, the document asserts, is nothing less than the dismantling of U.S. economic supremacy and the ushering in of a new global order, led by China. This leaked resolution offers a rare glimpse into the high-level deliberations and strategic depth behind China's global ambitions. More than a simple response to tariffs, it signals a larger ideological and geopolitical contest now unfolding between the world's two leading powers. Amid mounting global discourse suggesting that President Donald Trump's sweeping tariff agenda could alienate the United States and shift the world's economic center of gravity toward China, recent developments suggest otherwise. Prominent voices in media and policy circles have echoed concerns that Trump's policies could fracture long-standing alliances, inadvertently creating an opening for Beijing to assert leadership over global trade. However, on-the-ground diplomatic activity reveals that China is far from achieving such a pivot. In recent weeks, Beijing has intensified its diplomatic engagements, signaling a proactive strategy in response to the escalating trade standoff. Premier Li Qiang initiated a phone call with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte on April 4, stressing the importance of safeguarding global supply chain stability. A week later, President Xi Jinping hosted Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in Beijing for bilateral discussions. Xi then embarked on a tightly packed tour of Southeast Asia. From April 14 to 15, he visited Vietnam to bolster the comprehensive strategic partnership, where numerous agreements on trade, education, and infrastructure were ceremonially unveiled. However, many were merely memoranda of understanding. Xi's itinerary continued with a visit to Malaysia from April 16 to 17, focused largely on Belt and Road Initiative projects, followed by a stop in Cambodia to discuss Beijing-funded economic and security initiatives. Despite this flurry of outreach, the core of Washington's alliance system remains intact. Strategic partners such as Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, South Korea, and Australia continue to cooperate closely with the United States. Though trade disputes persist, these countries have chosen engagement over confrontation, reflecting shared democratic values and a reliance on U.S. security guarantees. On April 16, Japan resumed active negotiations with Washington, expressing optimism about achieving a comprehensive deal. France has voiced concerns about the potential influx of surplus Asian goods into European markets, a byproduct of redirected trade flows due to U.S. tariffs. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has taken a firm stance, warning against the circumvention of tariffs through Europe, and vowing that the EU will take protective measures if necessary. Meanwhile, China's efforts to court strategically pivotal nations such as Vietnam and India appear to have met with limited success. During his April visit to Hanoi, Xi urged Vietnamese leaders to oppose unilateralism and trade bullying, a veiled reference to the United States, but received no official endorsement. Instead, on April 18, Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh reaffirmed the unique and elevated nature of U.S.-Vietnam relations during a meeting with the U.S.-ASEAN Business Council. India, likewise, has refrained from countering American tariffs. On the contrary, New Delhi views the shifting trade dynamics as an opportunity to supplant China in global supply chains and to attract investment from the U.S. and its allies. In sum, while Beijing has mobilized significant diplomatic capital in response to Washington's tariff policy, its influence remains constrained. Many nations continue to prioritize their economic and strategic interests, and when forced to choose, they are either staying neutral or gravitating toward the stability and shared values offered by alignment with the United States. China's recent diplomatic overtures, though ambitious, have so far failed to shift the global balance decisively in its favor. The leaked resolution discloses two covert financial contingency plans in preparation for a potential economic split from the United States. The first mandates that authorities track foreign deposits of $200,000 or more held by Communist Party members, government officials, and state enterprise executives. In the event of a major decoupling, their families must repatriate funds held in the U.S. or transfer them to approved jurisdictions, or face charges of international misconduct. The second plan focuses on rapid divestment. Should Beijing authorize economic disengagement, it intends to swiftly offload $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds and $2 trillion in American equities and corporate debt. On the domestic front, the resolution stresses strengthening China's internal economic circulation to reduce external dependence. In response to Trump's national emergency declaration, local governments are ordered to prepare to restore domestic supply chains fully or partially. This restoration, the resolution claims, is China's strategic advantage in countering U.S. economic pressure. It is well documented that members of China's political and business elite, including officials' families, often pursue education and citizenship abroad, frequently investing offshore wealth into foreign assets, particularly in the United States. These overseas ties complicate any attempt by Beijing to repatriate funds, potentially triggering elite pushback against Xi Jinping's consolidation of power and weakening internal loyalty to the leadership. Meanwhile, any large-scale liquidation of U.S. Treasury bonds, equities, or corporate debt carries considerable consequences. Such a move would likely trigger a decline in both the dollar and U.S. markets, inflicting financial losses on Beijing itself. Moreover, Washington could retaliate by restricting Chinese entities' market access, delisting firms, or freezing accounts, as it did with Moscow. The resolution's proposal to revive domestic supply chains is presented as a strategic advantage, but it evokes parallels with the state-controlled distribution of the Mao-era. Reintroducing rationing could risk repeating past traumas like the Great Leap Forward's mass famine or the social chaos of the Cultural Revolution, where millions perished and families were torn apart. Whether today's citizens would accept such sacrifice without resistance remains a critical question. In the geopolitical arena, China's internal directive calls on its Foreign Ministry and International Liaison Department to build a unified front with Russia, Iran, and North Korea as a strategic axis to counter President Trump's policies. Simultaneously, it urges expanded influence in neighboring and southern states, especially enhancing China's footprint in Southeast Asia through economic, cultural, and military channels in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand. The document further insists that officials apply Marxist principles, emphasizing the primacy of economics over politics, to exploit European and Canadian discontent over U.S. tariffs, seeking to fracture or weaken NATO's post-war alignment with Washington and erode U.S. influence in alliances with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. The aim is to marginalize the U.S. politically as well as economically, dismantling its global leadership role established since 1945. However, while Beijing sees alignment with Moscow, Tehran, and Pyongyang as a strategic cornerstone, each partner is increasingly isolated. Russia remains under heavy sanctions following its invasion of Ukraine. Iran faces widespread condemnation for ties to militant groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and North Korea draws global censure for its persistent missile launches and nuclear threats. Rather than forging a stronger bloc, China risks alienating Western powers and pushing NATO states closer to Washington. Economic friction, while significant, is more manageable than the security consequences such alignments provoke. Meanwhile, Beijing's courtship of ASEAN states has yielded limited returns. President Xi's high-profile visits to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia were rich in symbolism and cooperation agreements, but failed to secure clear political alignment against the United States. On the military front, China's confidential directive calls for total alignment across the Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army with President Xi Jinping's strategic doctrine on confronting the United States in a decisive conflict over Taiwan. The resolution argues that if the trade conflict escalates beyond economic parameters, a military confrontation will become unavoidable. In such a scenario, seizing the initiative by choosing the battlefield is considered crucial. The Taiwan Strait is identified as the preferred arena, where Beijing believes it can leverage mainland China's strategic depth and geographical proximity to offset U.S. power projection. Within this framework, the resolution outlines a new model of conventional warfare, characterized by comprehensive battlefield awareness enabled by integrated, high-tech systems, all underpinned by a robust nuclear deterrence posture. It details a mission to neutralize U.S. military installations in Japan, South Korea, and Guam, anticipating American intervention, with the ultimate goal of forcing a U.S. military retreat east of Hawaii. This, the resolution claims, would strip the U.S. of its Pacific dominance and reduce it to a regional actor. The final declaration encapsulates Beijing's posture: only by enduring the storm of comprehensive confrontation, including tariff wars led by President Trump, can China emerge triumphant. Xi Jinping's vision of a community of common destiny for mankind is presented not merely as an ideological goal, but as the intended trajectory for global development in the 21st century. Indeed, this framework reveals long-standing military planning aimed at a Taiwan Strait scenario, China's most defensible theater due to its proximity to the mainland. With missile forces, including ballistic, cruise, and hypersonic systems, positioned within striking range, Beijing seeks to offset its current disadvantages in air and naval power by anchoring any future clash to this geographic and tactical stronghold. President Trump has reportedly devised a contingency plan to redirect American focus from Europe to Asia, beginning with a push to bring the Russia-Ukraine conflict to a swift conclusion. Nonetheless, various interest groups continue to obstruct peace efforts, seemingly aiming to entangle the U.S. in prolonged European commitments that drain military resources and financial capital. In recent weeks, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Trump both made it clear that, should negotiations fail to achieve tangible progress, Washington would abandon its role as mediator. Trump emphasized that the war is Europe's problem to solve, signaling a withdrawal of U.S. involvement in order to concentrate on the growing threat from Beijing. In parallel, the Pentagon is refining its Taiwan defense strategy. Admiral Samuel Papero, head of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, has outlined the so-called Hell's Cape Doctrine. This strategy involves saturating the Taiwan Strait with autonomous surface vessels, aerial drones, and unmanned submarines, designed to inflict maximum disruption on any Chinese amphibious assault. The aim is to create a technologically fortified barrier that would delay or halt Chinese forces, providing crucial time for Allied forces to mobilize. The United States' technological superiority plays a central role in this deterrence posture. America fields 20 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers and is currently developing the B-21 Raider, engineered with multispectrum invisibility. Alongside this, the new F-47 sixth-generation fighter jet has entered production, significantly enhancing Washington's capacity to neutralize Chinese forward-deployed military assets in the event of open conflict. Complementing these capabilities is a strategic redistribution of U.S. forces. Military bases have been repositioned across the Indo-Pacific, with new and decoy airfields constructed in partner nations to ensure survivability and operational flexibility in a high-intensity engagement. Beyond known military assets, officials suggest the existence of undisclosed black tech within the U.S. arsenal. Posts circulating on X earlier this year quoted President Trump as hinting at a top-secret weapon of unmatched power, one so advanced that no foreign military could defend against it. He described it as the world's most powerful weapon, though its nature remains classified. Further speculation surrounds potential breakthroughs in advanced physics. One post cited Michael Kraschiat, director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, who alluded to U.S. technologies capable of manipulating space and time. Theorists link this to the rumored TR-3B, a black triangular aircraft believed to employ anti-gravity propulsion, capable of eluding radar detection. Should such a system exist, it could neutralize strategic Chinese installations before their operators even detect an incoming threat. A profound sense of anxiety now permeates China's highest levels of governance. Senior Communist Party officials are increasingly concerned that former President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff regime could spark widespread joblessness by mid-year. Forecasts for 2024 indicate that fewer than 1 in 3 graduates from China's universities and technical institutes will secure formal employment, while the majority will be relegated to precarious or short-term roles. By 2025, with an influx of 12 million new graduates and a swelling population of jobless migrant laborers, the nation faces a looming employment crisis. Such instability poses a serious threat to the social order that Beijing has long sought to preserve. Should the economic outlook worsen, China may be compelled to reinstate a centrally controlled rationing economy reminiscent of the Mao-era subsidy model, an approach certain to deepen poverty and hardship. The fallout could extend beyond economic stagnation, potentially igniting long-simmering tensions within Chinese society. Under such conditions, President Xi Jinping's greatest vulnerability in the event of military conflict over Taiwan may not lie in U.S. military strength, but within his own inner circle. Reports suggest that many senior PLA officers are suspected of covert dissent and wavering allegiance. Sources linked to the so-called Red Second Generation claim that numerous senior and mid-level commanders within the Chinese military quietly anticipate, and even welcome, a cross-strait confrontation. A wartime emergency, they believe, could serve as the catalyst for Xi's ouster and a realignment of leadership. Though Xi retains the titles of General Secretary, President, and Chairman of the Central Military Commission, his grip on power is under increasing strain. His governing faction, particularly within the armed forces and state bureaucracy, is widely regarded as deeply compromised by corruption. The investigation of General Miao Hua, once a key Xi appointee, illustrates this erosion of authority. Miao's downfall late last year unveiled the corruption of over 80 senior officers overnight, a number that has since ballooned to 1,300, including nearly 100 generals and lieutenant generals. Crucially, many of those implicated rose through the ranks under Xi's own tenure, as the probe into Miao Hua's dealings widens. Senior figures at Zhongnanhai are reportedly compiling extensive dossiers that may be used to undermine Xi's leadership. The internal balance of power appears to be shifting. One of the most telling developments is the replacement of the party's personnel chief, a Xi loyalist, with Shi Taifeng, a protégé of the late Premier Li Keqiang and associate of former President Hu Jintao. This change marks a significant weakening of Xi's influence over top-level political appointments and signals a broader unraveling of his control within the party hierarchy. With the US-China trade standoff intensifying, China's domestic political landscape is entering a period of heightened uncertainty. The outcomes of this unfolding drama remain unclear, but the stakes are enormous. The questions now are, who will yield, and who will emerge on top? Only time will tell.